All right. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the May 12th edition of the SBO Weekly Developer Call. We don't have any specific announcements for today, but we have a few topics for discussion. Um, Feni, Kardaki, or Baiju, would you like to talk about
Yeah,
the
Karthik, I can
foundation?
go, right?
Yeah,
Okay, Feni is also here. So I think I'll start with that one. You guys can uh, jump in. Okay.
Yep.
So this was something while we were working on the Shift Week internal project, we used a GitOps system called Argo CD, and along with the GitOps, we used to keep the data. We use hem charts. So in GitOps, you could use hem charts or plain YAML or even templatized YAML. That is that you can keep in different formats. So our thought was like if GitOps is providing a way to configure your Kipa data, also we can do templatized format. And if we do this projection, I mean data projection through, in template we can define that volume mount, all those kind of things, whatever the SBO is doing. And we know in prior to that where is the data coming from also. For example, let's say it's a secret or maybe even a provision service. See, we'll get to know that exact name of that secret, everything, by understanding that backing service, right? So that way I can create my templatized this deployment configuration. Let's say if it's a hem chart, I can keep all those volume bound everything ready. So that way, whenever there is a change happening in the Git repository, the change will be reflected in the same way how service binding operator does. The same way it will be deployed into the cluster, right? So this it's going to become like a cycle. As soon as whenever there is a change, uh, not live change. Let's say I hope people will be intentionally making database. For example, one possibility is that database password could be rotation, right? Could be rotated. So that will be an intentional change. So those kind of things will be happening through in the GitOps way. It will happen in this Git repository, and then it will propagate to the real production clusters.
right.
So our thought is like when we use GitOps with Argo CD or similar systems, when at least when it goes to the production system, is SBO as an operator need to be running 24/7 to do this kind of reconciliation work, or can we just use this kind of systems to do projection? That is the thought came
But
to. That
GitOps
may
for what? I mean, GitOps for the service or GitOps for the application?
for
Those,
the
those are those are two
entire
different things,
deployment.
right?
No, no. I think my understanding is that GitOps people use as a wall, like for service, application, everything all together. The
Yeah,
entire infra.
if you manage the whole thing, that means you manage the whole life cycle of the service. Meaning
Yeah,
you're not really. I mean, you can do whatever you want basically because you manage the life cycle of the service. You can bind directly to secret. You can do whatever you want there, right? So you have more, but that means you, as a DevOps engineer, you're aware of the service. You understand exactly what the service is doing. You know how to map it to secrets. You know whether it's provision service or not. It doesn't matter, right? To me,
yeah. Even if it is provision service, let's say AWS RDS, right? So I hope that password or any of these details will not change arbitrarily at any point of time, right? So that means that will be intentional change. And still, if we're keeping it as part of our configuration, I mean, in our Git repository, see, we can still manage to use this kind of system, right? And or if it is only the
yeah. If
application.
if so, that's a specific use case, but you. I think you're right, but it's a specific use case that means the developer manages the life cycle of the service, right? If that's not the case, meaning the developer only consumes services via SBO, that's what SBO is used for, right? Then, you know, there's two different pipelines in that GitOps system, right? In Argo CD. One pipeline is for the workload, one pipeline is for the service, right? And then yes, when the pipeline for the service does the change in the service, it'll change the service and hopefully SBO will catch the change, right? That's the idea.
Yeah, SB is not required because we have a templatized, that means that secret name, even if it is dynamic, that could be handled through the template, right? So it could be something like a values.yaml value, or let's say we have a backing service, also we make consuming the same secret. So that could be parameterized through a value set in values.yaml file. And the same thing could be given to in both template file, that whatever YAML template and other files. So that way, the backing service CR may be having the same information. That means we'll know exactly which secret that we need to point to, right? So that way, the value will be available, whatever the secret that will be mounted, and the value will be available as a file in the file system. So application will work just like how SBO is doing the binding, right?
I'm still not understanding the
Okay, my
the
point
difference.
is,
So
yeah.
so
So
you mean SBO is not even in the picture? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, correct. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay. So
SBA
SBO is
becomes
not even in the
completely
picture. Okay.
redundant in a production cluster system. So
You
operator
don't
is
need
not
to run
switched
it.
off.
Yeah, you don't need to run
Yeah.
it 24/7. I mean,
Yes. So SBO might be useful in a scenario where people are working, developing some application during the initial development stage when they're playing around with different backends and things like that. But when it comes to a real production environment, SBO running or watching so many services and running 24/7,
Yeah.
that's not really required in if people are using this kind of Argo CD or this kind of similar systems. So it's a
Yeah. I
completely
mean,
redundant piece which they could avoid.
yeah. If you're not using SBO, that means the application needs to understand what needs to do ahead of time, right? So it needs to mount the volume, right? So it needs to,
Yeah, it's all part of
and
the
it needs to
configuration,
consume.
right?
It's all part
The
of the
template.
configuration, exactly. So the
Yeah.
application configuration already will know what to do, basically, right? And then based
Yeah.
on the configuration, then Argo CD will take actions, right? Whatever action.
Yeah.
So, but that's there today. That's the
Yes.
way to do it. The problem with that model is that once you move to, you know, another environment, then you need to do something custom there. If you were using SBO, you don't need to do anything too custom, only add a different label maybe, right? So if you're doing label selector with SBO and you move to a next stage in the pipeline, right? Your configuration is very tiny compared to service binding, right? Maybe you still have some other config like my rate limiting or my number CPUs, whatever capacity, all that stuff is still configurable. But from a service binding point of view, all you need to do, if you had SBO in the picture, all you need to do is add different label selectors for different stages of the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to rely on Argo CD to understand, oh, this is a new config. By the way, the art is RDS, it's not local, and then Argo CD needs to go and you need to code that logic, right, in the Argo CD that says, oh, then I need to mount it differently, right? So
Yeah, it is not the Argo CD that gives the capability that wherever whatever tools we are using underneath, like one of the commonly used is obviously hem charts, and another one is there is a plain YAML of plus customize. Customize is that it's like a what they call similar to but without template you can customize your configurations, right? So that's what customize called.
right. And then the Helm chart, we
So
have different options and says, oh,
yeah,
mount it like this, mount it like that, but that has to be built into the Helm chart, right?
yeah.
Right.
So one option could be like I can think of is like they can create different branches in the Git repository. One for production environment, another for master branch for staging environment like that, and then that contains different values for those respective environments.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
and
works.
still just
That,
one more point I want to add. So that means certain parts of the spec at least can be made use. So that will become a transition from this kind of configuration to our SBO way of working. For example, the service binding route and the value where we are projecting, all those things can be mimicked in the same system when they are using Argo CD. That means initially when they start the project, they could start with SPO and it will work. They can even use that whatever respective language specific client libraries, So that way they can work with SBO. And later when they decide that at some point of time SBO is becoming like a unnecessary, they could do all this kind of things in this configuration in Helm charts or customize. They could completely remove, but still benefit from the same structure, because it is for it has this service binding route, and that structure everything getting
Right.
created. So that will continue to work, right? So they can use it like a combination. In some cases, they can SBO they can use it during the development phase, but when it goes to the real production element, they can completely remove the SBO operator from the cluster. Just one operator down.
Yeah, I just don't see the point of doing that. I mean, that's yes, that works.
Yeah.
That's another way to do bindings, but it's not helping
Not
the SBO
everyone. Not
project.
everyone. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
You're not helping the SBO project promoting that, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So
Not as be promoting, but I was just thinking whether it could be a reality in the world when they realize that
that,
SQ is an unnecessary stuff that basically eating up a lot of memory, and where we could simply do the same thing with the simple hem charts or customized
yeah,
configuration.
that's not that's very custom logic.
Yeah,
So it's like for this pipeline, everything works. Yes, I know how to bind. I know how to change in different environments. By the way, if the environment changes again, you need to code it again. You know, and make sure the Helm chart covers that use case. So it's a constant pampering, right, of the end-to-end solution, right? And that
yeah,
works. That's what people do. I mean, that's why you have DevOps engineers that just do this, right? Pipelines. The idea with SBO is to simplify the pipeline completely, and I think you could do it even without provision services, because we can have predetermined services via service endpoint definitions. If the service endpoint definitions are there, which are the secrets, which is at the end what matters, right? Then service binding should be able to bind to those. And then those are stuff that could change as part of the pipeline setup, right? Not necessarily as part of the GitOps changes, but as part of the pipeline setup, you set up those services already. And then the application itself doesn't have to worry about that. That's for example, in a App Studio and App Cloud managed environment, then there has to be something else that happens on that managed environment from the Red Hat operators, right? The Red Hat admins that will do some stuff to get it ready for the user, right? Oh, these are all the services available. This is how you deploy the services. These are the things that need to be in place for binding to work. And then at the end, the application doesn't need to worry about none of that stuff. The application only worries about what are the services available and how and what's the label I use to bind to it. That's it, right? So
yeah. I
there's
think
more work
this.
that needs to happen at the administrator level and tooling that needs to be there in the administrator layer before the operators are ready with all the automation that needs to happen to get provision services, right?
Yeah, I can see there are a lot of value, especially in enterprise world, where they may not have this kind of proper, DevOps or GitOps operations all in place. So it will be definitely useful. But once someone who really mastered all this proper DevOps culture with the GitOps or everything, some of these parts could become redundant, at least in their production environment. That's the kind of
Yeah.
thought
So
of
I think the idea
sharing.
is to simplify that DevOps craziness, right?
Yeah.
Meaning I could get a student out of college to be able to do a pipeline. You know what I mean? Because we reduce, that's the idea. The end goal is to reduce the knowledge that DevOps engineer need to have on the underneath cloud infrastructure, right? If they can start thinking more abstract, like this is my application that uses a service, this is our link to the service. That's the idea, the end goal, right? So that the developers can do more, and more junior developers don't need to understand Kubernetes 100%. They don't need to understand cloud providers, APIs, right?
Yeah. Right.
So
Right.
it's like to be able to get more productivity is the end goal. And then these pipelines that only talked about services and labels is a lot easier than a Helm chart that I need to make sure that it covers all these cases in different stages, right? So yeah, that works. That's how we did the pipeline in IBM for KMS. We have template. We wouldn't use Helm. We use Jinja templates. But that's
okay.
exactly how we did it. Is Jinja templates to change from stage to stage. This is different here. This is different here. Different here. Right. So
Yeah, right.
and that
So
works.
basically, I think SPO and the spec, everything bringing a lot of standardization into the process. So that's definitely going to help a lot of people. But when some people, some organizations decide to go for fully optimized way, they really want to cut down wherever they see an opportunity to reduce cluster load. One of the thing could be cut down would be SPO, right? So
Not if
that
the
means a very
developers love it. If the developers love it,
yeah.
that's not gonna get cut down. It's like I need it. They're gonna say I need SBO because
Yeah, it
this
could
is how
be
I do service binding.
yeah, and it can be used in a combined way also, fashion also, like SPO, the way projection, everything will be like, it will be compatible. At the same time, only the production configuration, they could flip to not use SPO. That's also a possibility,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Anyway, I would like to hear anybody else has this kind
Yeah.
of
Someone
thoughts.
else maybe. Yeah. If someone else has an idea on that, but I think we're not helping the SBO project if we find alternative that don't use SBO. So this is
No, I
SBO.
mean, see, finding something other than only our thinking for SBO, like might help us in changing SBO or maybe updating SBO in such a way that it should or it might cover that thing also, that
Provide
category.
value to
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right.
So
Or
adding
tooling,
that
or
well,
tooling, right? So which
something of that sort. See, if this is something we came across, this came across, I mean, as a thought to us when we were doing it as a, like using it as a developer.
yeah.
Anybody else who won't be doing it, they will come across the same thing. So we should be adding something to update it or add value to SBO on this front also.
Right. So the application itself is SBO aware, but SBO is not even in the picture because the pipeline is gonna do things for you, not
Yeah.
service binding, basically, right? So that's the difference here.
So I
Um,
mean, something of that sort, or making SBO popular in that sense that they don't think in this direction itself. So something.
yeah, I mean, from that point of view, it might be that you're saying that the workloads that SBO enable, even though SBO is not installed. So maybe
Yes.
that's one benefit. But it's a little dangerous to say, oh, yeah, you don't need SBO.
No, not that way. But yeah, see, people would think this way, right? We need all the perspective. Like,
For sure.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay. Good. No, thank you for the conversation. Moving on to the next topic, or rather, the second part of this topic. Who would like to speak to this one?
Karthik, like you want to take this out, Baiju, you'll continue.
No, you guys carry on.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a problem. I mean, like when we were working on this site, we developed the application using certain client libraries and we needed to update the application in a particular manner so that it becomes compatible to SBO, right?
Right.
So, like, we need to create an environment variable and then, like, we need to follow in the certain steps, right?
Mhm.
So, can we let go of that and still make it usable with SBO? How is it possible, or how can we think on those lines? Not using, like, not creating the binding directory and still able to do that, right?
What do you mean?
What I'm trying to say is, like, we need to create environment variable there and then we need to project the binding over there, right? I mean, SBO collects the data and then injects it as a volume in the application so that
Right.
it is available, right? But we, in that, by doing so, we want the application to be developed in a particular manner,
That's
right?
right.
So it is tending to limit or asking the developer to implement it in a particular way.
Right.
So can we make it a little more flexible?
Yeah.
That was something
Yeah.
which we saw there, right?
So what do you guys think about then? Do you think about anything?
Not really. I mean, how
I'm
can we
sure
do that?
Baju knows. Baju, how do we
I
fix this?
actually don't.
How
I
will
think
you fix this problem of you gotta ask the developer now to add something else, right? To understand service binding.
I think having this kind of standardized way of doing things would be better, in my opinion, because it doesn't matter whether it is SBO or somebody else is creating this. service binding root, and which is pointing to any language can read a environment variable basically, right?
Right.
Of course, they need to tailor their application in such a way that they understand these concepts. That is the only key here.
Yeah, but I could inject data via site containers. I could inject data via environment variables. I could inject data via mount volumes. There's many ways I can inject data into a container, right?
Yeah, then we are
So-
losing the standardization. See, the whole
Right.
point of this spec is
Right.
that
So
we
how
are
do we
coming
make
with a
it standard? Right. So how will you do it? I have a solution. I just want to make sure that you guys don't have anything else. I don't want to bias.
No, nothing.
So the solution is SDKs. You set up SDKs for all the languages, and then you just say, no, you don't have to worry about this. If you use service binding or a service binding compatible pipeline, if you want to call it like that, right? Use this SDK to get you a config object with all the service data. Yeah. So that way you don't have to worry about it. You use it as a library, like the same way you go and say, oh, let me get a library to do some parsing for YAML, right? Oh, let me get a library to get data from my services, and then it's just gonna be go mod add, and then you have a structure. Use the structure with if my go through a list, right? If my service type is this and provider is this, I have my service, right? So that we can even have more classes inside those SDKs or functions that simplify that logic of I'm looking for this specific service, right? So give me the config for that.
So the SDK becomes a dependency for that application, right?
Right. So that means we need more work. I mean, the work is not done. We need to create SDKs or create a community of SDKs that people can contribute, right? And then definitely, because that way, otherwise you're asking the application developer to do too much, and and then if they don't have a dependency on SBO, meaning they will do whatever they want. You know what I mean? Now, if you provide an SDK and a mechanism like this is how you mount the secrets in your pipeline, then at least they'll think in SBO, right? And they're using the SDK, and then they're ready. And then when SBO is ready, then they're already set up from the application point of view.
But how do we decide which language that need to be supported?
The popular one first. The popular ones
Yeah.
first.
That's metrics, right?
Python, Go,
Go.
Java.
I feel like we should have some kind of metrics on what languages are being used to develop cloud applications. We could probably use that as a good way of determining what to prioritize. I mean, yes, they're the obvious big ones. Like we're going to want to target Python. We're going to want to target Java. We're going to want to target Go.
Right.
But what else is there? Like,
Is there?
Are people just like developing web applications in Haskell and we just don't know about it?
Yeah, or Rust.
Node.js.
Node.
Node.js.
Yeah. Node. Yeah, a lot of people using Node nowadays.
Node is easier, and people actually want to use Node to show the UI and everything.
Yeah.
But yes.
And those are fun projects. And then as if we have like a governance, these are the features that the SDK should have. It doesn't matter what language, right? At least, and people can come in and contribute their version of the SDK, right? And then whoever wins makes it, and people say, "Oh yeah, I like this library. Let me use it."
Yep.
And then, oh, how do I get the data? No, yeah, mount it like this. There's some instructions. You need to mount the data like this so that you can use the SDK to get it, right? So
Great. Thank you.
here's another problem that I see on that end. Now, this is only 4 minutes, but a lot of DevOps people like to keep the config in one place, exactly to be able to do GitOps, right? So if you start separating now, if you're dealing with services, this is how you deal with services. You got to create secrets like this, a mountain, right? But if you're dealing with no secret configuration, with no service configuration, like my own configuration, then you do your own thing, right? only works when you have a strong reason to do the service configuration like this, meaning you have something helping you to do the work, right? So if you don't have something helping you to do the configuration work or anything else, like an SDK, like SBO, or like all that stuff, then it's not even worth it. It's like, no, I just keep it in my own etcd, right, database, and then based on the different stages, I make whatever customization, right? So and then I need to be aware of my stages. What are the change points in each stage of the pipeline? So,
Yep.
and that's simpler from a design point of view. That's simpler. That's why that's another thing that might be a friction to adoption, right?
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Any last comments before we drop? One thing that I would keep and ask is please take a look at the issues and items in our backlog. If there's any items that requires actions, please take a look and follow up on them. Just included a link to our issues in case you need it. It looks like there's a few bugs and stories that's there. So, okay. Any other last minute comments? All right. Have yourselves a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Good
Thanks.
discussion.
Thank you.